Welcome to Budgeting and Planning for Capital Costs webinar from the Wisconsin Library Buildings and Spaces Project. I'm John Thompson. I'm the director of the IFLS Library System, and I am joined with Brittany Larson from the Muskego Public Library.
Hi, everyone. All right. Let's see here. I'm just going to move us to our next slide. All right. So first, we're going to take a bit of a step back and talk about where to find these projects. So when we're talking about budgeting and planning for capital costs, where are these projects found and where do they live? And a lot of times where you're going to find these projects and where you should plan for these projects is in your long-range planning. If you don't have a strategic plan, maybe this presentation might spur you to start considering it. You can start small with like a year-long plan and then build up to a strategic planning process that will really encompass maybe a 3, 4, or 5-year outlook. It really helps you set up a framework for talking to your stakeholders, your patrons, your community members about what they want to see from the library. And it also makes you much more intentional about building in these projects and pacing it out amongst the life of your library, so it doesn't hit your budget too hard in one year and it doesn't hit your staff too hard in terms of like workload. So working on a strategic plan is a great idea for finding these projects and then also planning these projects out and spacing them out. You also may want to look at and see if your city or your municipality has a long-range plan as well. A lot of cities will plan out comprehensive plans that may even look 25 years into the future. And you want to ask yourself, is the library in this plan? Were we part of the process? Are we being considered? And at the very least, what are the trends that they are seeing? Because your city's putting an effort into developing this plan. They're analyzing demographics. They're talking to stakeholders. And anything that you see that might, intersect with your mission statement, that may be a good place to find a capital project. And of course, if you can show your municipality that your actions dovetail with their plan, that is just a good idea. All right. So this is just a sample. John and I have samples throughout this presentation on what we're talking about. So when you see the word sample, it's just something that's reflecting what we previously talked about. And this is a sample of my library strategic plan. It's a 4-year plan. And the page that I showed you the table of contents so you can sort of see what is all included in our strategic plan. It's about a 19 to 20 page document, and it covers different strategic goals that we have related to our facilities, services, and communication. The page that I showed you on the right is really just an example of our facility plan over the past 4 years. And I showed this page because, of course, capital projects, they can be service related, they can be building related. So this is just an example of the types of projects that we set up related to our building. And again, this seems like a lofty goal if you were trying to do it all at once. It would be an expensive thing if you tried to do it all at once. But if you spread it out over 4 years and you're requesting money over those 4 years and you're working with staff over the 4 years to execute these projects, it becomes much more feasible. So this is just an example of how a strategic plan can help you budget and plan for your capital projects. After you're considering the strategic planning portion of it to find those projects and put those projects in, the project exploration phase is one of the first areas that you want to consider when you're thinking about a project. And that covers a couple of areas. First is a needs assessment, which is basically just, should the project be done? Because there are lots of great ideas out there, but not all of them should happen. And so it's really asking yourself in that first step, do we need to do this project? And that could take the form of investigating, talking to stakeholders, doing surveys, talking to staff, There's lots of different things that could go into gathering statistics, usage statistics, to decide whether you need to have it happen. After a needs assessment, you're going to ask yourself, is it possible? Can we actually do it? Because you may decide this is something we should do, but whether or not it's possible is a completely different matter. And so assessing the feasibility of it, you may be bringing in outside perspectives such as IT. Can we set up a Wi-Fi network that covers, this area of the building? It may consider maintenance. It may consider library staff, because frankly, this project may impact workload and workflow. And so you really want to talk to your staff. It may be an engineering question, and there may be some engineers listening to this presentation, but I can tell you that I definitely, when I got my library degree, I did not get an engineering degree at the same time. And so you may need to talk to an engineer and say, if I punch a hole in the side of my building to do this project, will it collapse? You need to tell me. So feasibility studies and needs assessments are two different things, but also very important as you're exploring this project. This is about the time when I'm usually trying to get ballpark estimates, informal quotes, because that can really impact your feasibility as well, right? You may decide, this is a project, I know it needs to happen, I think it's possible to happen, but then it ends up being so far out of what you know is realistic that may just end the project right there. So getting ballpark estimates to really just get an idea, like, well, what are we talking about here? This may be the time when you start to need design renderings. What would it look like if we did an expansion to our building? Schematic plans. I want to renovate our restrooms. What is the plumbing and the electrical going to look like? Because that may seem a bit early to do it, but all of those things impact whether or not the project is feasible or reasonable to happen based on the price point. Schematic plans are not construction plans. I found that out the hard way when I paid for schematic plans, thinking I would also get construction plans. So know that. And just really recognize that in this project exploration phase, you may not think that it's actually going to cost you money, but you may have to budget just to explore this project, which is why needs assessment is so important, because you really want to get to the point where you're saying, okay, if this is something we need to do, we may need to put some money into it just to decide whether or not it's possible to do, right? You may need to pay for engineers and designers and really start to shore up these resources to really fully decide whether or not this project can actually happen. John, do you have anything to add to that?
Nope.
Awesome.
And as Brittany mentioned, there's a couple of different types of projects that you may be looking at. So this is an example from the River Falls Public Library. They were doing an assessment actually on their entire building. So it ended up to being about a 72-page report that they received. And the examples here are kind of looking at their roof structure. The building is about 25 years old. So a lot of the infrastructure in the building, your HVAC, your plumbing, your roof, all of those types of things are getting closer towards the end of life. So you really need to kind of figure out what it's going to cost to do some of those maintenance things that are really long-term maintenance for a building. So they brought in engineers, they brought in a roofing contractor, they brought in a contractor that does cost estimating to kind of put together this entire report. So it's very detailed in the different areas that are available. So again, this is something that's going to be relatively expensive to get a full-blown assessment of your building. And so one of the things that they'll give you that narrative of what are some of the issues. So, part of it is like the shingles are starting to raise up. There's things that were installed improperly originally in the building, or there are things that can be done now that would be a better use of technology in the roofing industry to make the roof last longer once it's redone. So if we'll skip to the next slide there, it'll give you some examples of what they did in terms of actually climbing up on the roof and looking at some of the different things. So the shingles are lifted, there's some caulking that was done, different things that really show the age and the wear and tear on the building. So this is one of those things that would be helpful when you're going to your municipality is say, we need to put the roof into the municipal capital improvement plan, that these are the reasons why we're doing it. So they have a sense of what it looks like, because we're not all going to take a city council or library board meeting up to the roof of the building and take a walk around the roof. So you want to have somebody that's capable of providing some documentation just beyond the written word, so that you can get a better sense of what that is. And this is one of those things that your building may be new in the sense that it's been around 10, 15, 20 years, but things wear out, things break. So you want to make sure when you're doing that assessment that you keep it up to date and you really focus on things that are going to be high cost, that make the building livable for the library moving forward. Anything else, Brittany, you'd like to add?
Yeah, it's just, I think you bring up a good point that while it may be difficult sometimes to spend money on these types of like project exploration tasks, like a needs assessment or a feasibility study, don't think of the building as just being the building that you're spending money on, especially regarding things like a roof. The building is protecting the collection and the people that are inside it. And so that in itself is, it could be millions of dollars of, collection, and of course, staff safety, and the cost to like put new carpet in and new furniture in if like you're having bad leaks and things like that. So you want to think about, especially when you're doing building projects, not only maintaining the roof, but also protecting what's inside of it too.
Yeah, and it's especially important if there was a severe storm that moved through your area with high winds or hail, to really go look at some of those exterior things for damage.
All right, so another needs assessment example. This is one that we did that actually did not cost us money to do. So, the nice thing about a needs assessment is you can scale it to the type of your project, right? So for a roof, which is going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, it is worth spending money to make sure that you have what you need to get the money for that project. This was a young adult area renovation. It was a smaller project, about 50 to 60,000. And just a couple of things. So we did this needs assessment in-house. We did a survey. We did an observation of patron behavior. I talked to staff, and we really built out, we did research and scholarly articles about why teens needed a dedicated space. And all of that was put into this document that my teen librarian, Amanda, designed. And so a couple of things to point out, you can make these items look professional when you're going to go and ask for money. So using infographics, data, and photos to help tell your story, it really shows, a professional appearance, right? Having color, your library branding on it, personalize it to your community. It basically is telling a visual story along with text about why you need what you need. And this was the inside of the needs assessment. So you can see that we sort of gave a timeline for the space, talked about the issues, gave some statistics, because we would often run into the question, well, teens don't even use the library. So we wanted to automatically counter that misconception. We talked about research that we did, and then ultimately the impact that we need lifelong library users, and making sure that they have a space where they feel welcomed helps secure that. And if this is starting to sound a lot like writing a grant, that is a lot of times what a needs assessment is ultimately, if you end up deciding that you need it, and you want to then show that you need it to someone else, the impact, the need, the reasons why, the data, all of that is a lot of things that we need in grants. And so the nice thing about a needs assessment is that if you gather all that data, you can put it into something like this, a professional report, like the one John showed you about the roof assessment, or this one, where you can then show it to your municipality, to your friends group, to your foundation, to a corporate sponsor. And it is, the needs assessment can sell the project. So it's not, this process shows you that you need the project. And then if you document it correctly and build a document around your findings, it can help sell your project.
So this is another example from the same library in River Falls. This is the feasibility study side of their project. So their first report really looked at the condition of the building. This one is looking at some of the spaces within the building and kind of creating a master plan on how to reimagine what the library looks like. So again, the building's about 25 years old. So a lot of things have changed in terms of technology, library services, and different functions that the library may be serving. So when we look at this design here, again, this is just basically a schematic concept design. It's not something you can take out to go for bid. It doesn't have the detail that you need to be providing to a contractor to give you a solid bid on. So we're kind of really looking at the main floor, looking at some of the staff work areas, some of the meeting rooms that are located on the main floor. So there are some unique things in here that probably would not be designed into a library today. So they created a computer lab, and there was a whole host of computers in a bank in a room that you basically closed off the door and they went in there and used the computers. Again, that's safety, a whole bunch of other privacy issues, things that really you really wouldn't want to have in a modern library because of technology change. And in fact, some of the libraries are dwindling their dedicated computers because people are using a lot more devices. So you've really cordoned off a space that you can't use. So we're going to focus on the staff area. This library was built prior to them joining a shared ILS within our library system. It was prior to a lot of materials flipping back and forth between our libraries. Our consortium started out small with a small number of libraries, and now we've encompassed about 50 some libraries within their consortium. So they're moving materials back and forth. And one of the things that they implemented during that process was a material handling unit, which they put in about 5 years ago in the existing staff space. So they didn't add any additional space. They just put the machine in there. So that really tightened up the staff work area. And so they're really trying to focus on how can we make this space better. So if you want to pop to the next slide, Brittany, this kind of reinforces how they're going to reimagine the staff areas. So building some more offices for staff, make use of some areas that are underutilized. So right now where the study room is kind of located in that upper left corner, that right now is an empty flat floor space that they just store empty book trucks in there. So it's really a waste of space that they are underutilizing in the library. So it gives, you know, a place for patrons to go study. If you look at the picture below, they basically have taped arrows so that they can control traffic in their workroom so that they don't run into each other when they're moving materials back and forth. So you have to go basically one-way streets within your staff area just to make sure you don't run into each other. So reconfiguring that staff work area and creating some offices and really benefiting that has an estimated price tag of $400,000. So this feasibility study gave some ideas of how extensive the remodel was going to be and an estimated cost based on today's dollars. So you can say, okay, yep, we really need to do this. Now we have to come up with $400,000. This may be deemed by the library as an essential project for serving the community. The city, on the other hand, may say, well, there's really nothing wrong with your space. It's just kind of, you want to make it better looking, or you want to make it more functional. So you as a library may have to decide, is this something that's so important that if the city's not going to fund it, we're going to go out and and start a capital campaign to make this happen. And what are the pieces that are we going to do within the building to make this happen? So if we rearrange the staff area, what are some other things that might change within our building that we also have to do at the same time so that we can continue to make the building flow? Or is this a standalone project that we can do and then it maybe implement some of the other projects a little bit later in a time frame? So those are the things that you kind of have to use as priorities when you're looking at the dollars and the cents of a project. Is this the highest priority? Is this the most cost-effective use of your dollars? Say yes, we want to go ahead and do this. So that's where the professional study helps, because when you get into these numbers, you're going to have to bid the project out, so you really only have an estimate of what the cost is going to be. If you say yes, this is what we're going to do, then they're going to take this drawing and make it more enhanced, so it'll get into all the finishes, the colors, and all of those things, so that they can actually send it out to bid. So you won't really know what your project's going to cost until it's been officially bid, but it's going to give you a rough estimate. Even if you do go out to bid and the bids come in too high, you can reject the bid, so you don't have to carry through with the project, but you've spent a significant amount of money to get to that phase. So, a $400,000 project like that, you may have, be spending $40,000 to $50,000 to get to a certain set of drawings, depending, all the way from the drawings to construction administration. That may be where your cost is in this project. It's going to depend on the scope and the size of the project and really what your architect's looking at. So the project cost doesn't necessarily always include your architectural fees and all the other permitting and licensing that you may need to do for your project. So make sure that all-in number includes everything that you need to make it basically ready for you to move in. So again, new shelving, new furniture, all of those things are costs that could be associated with a project like this. Anything else you'd like to add, Brittany?
Yeah, I mean, that's just a good point. There are so many steps to a building project, to capital projects, and I'll never forget the day that I was doing a capital project, and I was very proud because we had done the design perfectly for a service desk. Everything was timing out just right, and I was just standing out there one day looking at the old desk, being really happy that, we would be getting rid of that desk and getting a new desk, and someone walked by and said to me, "What are you doing with the old desk?" And I realized that I had not built in any plan to demolish the old desk, a dumpster to throw it all away, and, demolition, electrical, IT, dumpsters, like all of that stuff. If it's not included in the cost, or if that's not part of what a contractor or a certain service provider is willing to do, it may still be a part of your project. And trying to make sure that you've thought of everything. It's helpful to have a project team, frankly, especially the larger a project gets. You want more than one library staff member in the room to think about different things. So.
And always include some percentage for contingency, just in case, just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, rainy day fund. Another feasibility sample that I included from one of my experiences was the assessment of a drive-up book drop. Our strategic planning process when we were surveying patrons indicated this was something that they were interested in. So phase 1, exploration phase. I was doing a couple of things. I was looking at the traffic patterns and the fire lanes to determine a placement. So is it feasible to actually physically put it in, given our traffic patterns? I was talking with our circulation manager about the possibility of staffing the drive-up window. Like, if I'm going to put up another drive-up window, are we going to be able to staff this? Again, that's another feasibility thing. Is it feasible to staff this? So it's not just from an engineering perspective, can we put this in? From a staffing perspective, can we staff this? And then ultimately trying to sort of assess, what is the ballpark cost estimate of this, even before I bring in an engineer? What are all the things that might cost money? Again, I may not be able to perfectly price the project, but I knew in my head that past a certain price point, the project would not be viable anymore, which led us to phase 2, where I terminated the project, which is why it is so helpful to have this project exploration stage and why feasibility studies and needs assessments are so important. Because before I got to hiring an engineer to investigate the grading of the driveway against the building, before I got to the point where I was hiring a structural engineer to talk about the feasibility of carving a hole in the library, all of these would have required, you know, their fees, design drawings, schematic designs. I really just decided that the pricing on this project, thinking of all those things, would be beyond what the priority of the project was in the minds of the library, in the minds of the board. And so I just terminated the project in the midst of the feasibility study before we started really spending a lot of money to determine the advanced feasibility of it. So it is helpful to have these checks and balances and really take the time, carve out the time to explore this project as opposed to jumping in feet first, because it can save you a lot of money in the long run. So. Okay, so we've talked a bit about where to find these projects, these capital projects, and how to plan them out within your strategic plan of your library. We've talked a bit about doing needs assessments and feasibility studies to really explore the project to determine should it be done and is it feasible, possible to be done. But now we're getting to the point, let's say you know the project needs to be done, it's possible, how do we fund this project? And you may have already had to spend money to get to that point. Being part of your municipality's capital planning process is really, really, really helpful if you can swing it. I know that each library has their own relationship with your municipality, has their own processes for how capital projects and capital funds may be issued. Maybe your predecessor, if you're the library director, never used capital funds, but you know, no time like the present to like ask your municipality if it's possible to be considered. You may need to have some really sparkly needs assessments those first couple of years to really show them that investing in the library and divvying up some of those capital dollars is worth it. Developing your own library 5-year capital plan is important, and then refreshing it every year, because every year your current year falls off and then you add a new year on. And this really helps keep you looking forward, looking ahead, specifically related to your capital projects. You know, I know lots of people have their own building plans, right? How old is my HVAC and what's the end of life for that? How old's my roof? What's the end of life for that? So just, it helps you sort of keep in mind, like what's coming around the corner and is it a big scary budget monster? And if so, what do I need to do to start preparing for that? Because if your roof is going to be expensive, and all roofing projects are expensive, then you may need to do a needs assessment and a feasibility study that may require funding it. And you may need to do that a couple years in advance, right? Or at least a year or two in advance to start that exploration process, so that by the time you need the money, you've already taken the year to do the feasibility study and the needs assessment. So, and especially for projects like a new building, a major expansion or add-on, a new roof, those are little budget nuggets I like to drop before my library board and my municipality, maybe in advance of those 5 years. Like, hey, just so you know, this may be coming. What do you need from me? These are the things that I'm going to do. The example on the right is the example of my 5-year capital plan, as of June of 2022. So you can just see some of the types of projects that I'm considering: public furniture, additional study rooms, press room renovation, storage shed, parking lot repair, wayfinding signage, roof repair, key card door access, backyard amphitheater improvements. Some of these are more physical building, you know, like the restroom renovation. Some of these are more service oriented, like developing signage to help people get to the different service areas of the library. So your capital projects can be service improvements to help improve the services of the building and maintenance improvements. So, right. Anything to add to that, John?
No.
All right, and then, so when we're talking about capital funding sources, there's the municipality. You may have library reserves built up. You may have a friends group or library foundation to put requests in for. I don't have it listed here, but you could certainly try to get a corporate sponsor. And then, of course, there's the capital fundraising campaign. And frankly, corporate sponsors could be approached during that capital campaign. John made a really good point when we were discussing this topic about how service-based projects are easier to fund than maintenance projects. And I think the point was, you know, woohoo, do we want to renovate the children's area? Or woohoo, do we want to get a new roof? I have a feeling that asking for dollars for the children's area is probably a bit easier than the roof. So the screenshots here are just snapshots of the 5-year capital improvement requests forms that I fill out for my city each year. And just as a reminder, capital projects can have future and ongoing operational budget impact. So when you're thinking about, you know, converting your library to RFID, you know, there's operating impact. Actually, we're saving money by converting to RFID operationally, even though there's an initial capital cost. But if there's going to be personnel or software costs annually, you really want to think about all that because that certainly is a factor in whether or not the project is feasible. So. John, anything to that?
Yeah, just a reminder that just because you view your project as being a priority for the library when it's part of a capital improvement plan, it may not be the priority of the municipality in terms of their capital projects. You know, hopefully you're in a municipality that plans those expenses out over time, but there are municipalities that fly by the seat of their pants when they do projects. So they may just, you know, say, okay, we need a new fire truck this year, and they go out and buy a fire truck without really evaluating what are the other needs of the municipality and how does that fit within their borrowing capacity. All municipalities have a certain level of capacity in terms of borrowing money to pay for capital expenditures. So you'll have to be aware of that. And, you know, sometimes they're right up to the top of their level, so they can't go any higher. So you have to wait till projects fall off. So that's why, again, it's important to make sure that you're dropping that need out to them well in advance of a budget ask.
Yeah.
So if you've created a project that you feel is very important to improve the library, again, capital campaigns work best with service improvements. So redesigning the teen area, redesigning the children's area, those are much easier to sell to the community and, you know, frankly, donors and grant foundations and things like that, because it's something new and wow, as opposed to a maintenance project like, you know, putting a new roof on the building or redoing your parking lot. So you, as a library director, as a library staff person, or even as a board member, you can't do it alone. You need a team to help you with that. So you're going to create a campaign, and you're going to need people to lead that campaign and people to work on that campaign. And they are not just the library director. The library director already has a full-time job. You have to make sure that you have a team that's willing to be vocal about the project as well as do some legwork on behalf of the project. So it may be board members, it may be some library staff members, it's going to be community leaders, library lovers, so those are your stakeholders. You may decide that you need to hire a fundraising consultant. again, this is one of those things that's going to cost you money. So they can do a feasibility study. It'll cost some money up front to have that study done. And then they'll help support your campaign. They won't typically run your campaign. You still have to have the volunteers to be part of that campaign. Your architect and your designer can support the capital campaign with drawings, maybe some 3D renderings, maybe some computer animation. There are different things that they can do to help support the campaign, but they're not going to be the ones leading that campaign for you. So the example here is showing a campaign for the Oregon Library. There are a couple of co-chairs for the campaign. There's some honorary chairs. There's a steering committee, and then there's also the cabinet for the campaign. So there are lots and lots of people involved. You may not have that many people that are going to be part of your group, but you're going to need at least one or two folks that really will be the take charge people to make that campaign happen. So you want to find the right people, the ones with the connections in the community, the ones with some dollars to really make this campaign go forward. You want to go to the next slide, Brittany. So really what you're going to be looking at with a campaign is developing a timeline. Okay, what's reasonable for us to raise a certain level of money? Again, a consultant could help you with this, or you could craft it out yourself. There are two phases to a capital campaign. There's the quiet phase, where you're really looking for targeted donors to give you significant dollars. So if you're looking at $1 million project, for example, you want somebody that maybe is able to give you $250,000 to the project, or a couple $100,000 or $100,000. Those are the types of folks that you're looking for in the quiet phase. You'll start working on pledges. So you may want to do a phased giving. So let's say it's a 3-year pledge. So they'll give some money the first year, the same amount the second year, and the same amount the third year, for example. If your project starts before all those pledges are due, you'll need to make sure you have some dollars set aside to kind of bridge those dollars, because just because you have $1 million pledged doesn't mean you have $1 million to carry out the project. So you'll want to make sure you're taking that into account. You want to make sure as you're working through that quiet phase to kind of keep the information flow out there. You know, if you get some big donors, you'll want to maybe splash them up a teeny bit. Then when you get to a certain threshold, you know, let's say you're comfortable raising 60% of the funding during that quiet phase, or maybe it's 75%. You can pick a number, what feels comfortable to you. You're going to kind of end the quiet phase of the campaign and then start off a more public campaign where you're going to go out and maybe do some smaller scale fundraising awareness type activities. So maybe the Friends of the Library are doing a silent auction or a raffle or something like that. That's not going to generate a lot of money, but it's going to generate enough to kind of make it worthwhile, and then kind of keep the campaign out there. So again, in the public phase, you're still going to be talking to people individually. You may also be doing some, you know, mass mailings. Maybe you'll send a letter to everybody in your municipality, maybe everybody in the school district. You'll be continuing to write grants. So you'll do some big grants during the quiet phase, but you'll also be doing some of those same grants during the public phase, because some grantees, especially the larger foundations, will want to see some community support from the project. So they'll want to see that you've already raised 50% of the project cost. So you really want to make sure this campaign has enough public buy-in that it's going to be attractive to somebody to put their name on there. So, and that's one of the things that as you build this campaign, you have to look at how you want to frame your giving. So do you want to sell naming opportunities for the building, for spaces within the building, a combination of both? So you'll really want to be mindful of that. And how much do you want to sell within your building? So you can sell the children's room, you could sell some study rooms. You probably aren't going to sell the bathroom. I've seen libraries that will put naming rights onto individual chairs, onto shelves, onto pretty much anything that they could assign a price value to. But then you have to remember how you're going to recognize those donors. Are you going to put something on each of the individual chairs? Those are all things that you have to consider. And every piece of donor recognition that you do costs money. You have to pay for a plaque. You have to pay for something to be inscribed. So again, it's part of your campaign cost. And as your consultant is. So if you're trying to raise $1 million, you may also have to add another, $75,000 on there just for that fundraising consultant. So again, plan that out and make sure you establish targets in your campaign, so that if you can't get it done in that time frame, you can either continue it and say, yep, we're going to go for another 6 months, knowing that the cost of the project may have increased. So you're going to have to build some extra money into that campaign. Or you may just say, we're at 18 months. This is as good as we're going to get, and we're going to have to scale our project back. Those are considerations as you move forward with the campaign, where you're going to rest with this. So all of this kind of planning, in terms of naming opportunities, a policy, your recognition, all of that should be planned out before you start the COID phase, so that you know what you're planning to do. The donors know what they're going to expect from you in terms of recognition. You want to make sure you keep good records throughout this process. And whenever you receive a donation, you need to make sure that you send them a thank you and show your appreciation for their support, because you're really building a library for the community. So we're going to move to the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of that next piece of kind of looking at donor recognition. So we're going to kind of build some of this through. These are some examples from a couple of libraries. As you can see, they all take on a little different shape and feel to them. Every library has their uniqueness. So you're going to create your donor recognition based on what you feel is important. So if we look at the example from Prairie du Sac, some of the larger donors, those really go to the project itself, and this is really selling that project and recognizing the donors on that project. Where the example from Colby, they're leaves on a tree that they can continue to add donors to help support the library. So this recognition is really not just looking at the building project, but looking at long-term support for the library. So they can add, birds and butterflies and different things to this example moving forward for, additional dollars in support of the library. We'll go to the next slide. Again, a couple different examples. Again, these kind of are more fixed for permanency for the building project itself. One's, kind of like a metal pyramid, kind of laying out the donor levels. And then the other one's more of a wood inscribed thing. So that fits the setting of the library in Wanakee. It's, on a green space next to a stream. So it's kind of fitting that nature theme that the library was all about. So we'll pop to the next slide. So, as part of the campaign too is kind of building that awareness. So this is going to be an ongoing project, even, in some cases, even after you're done with that big library push, you might have some other needs for the campaign. You want to have a solid brand for your campaign. So have a name, a logo. You want to have some stories to share. You want to make sure you have, a website, Facebook presence. You want to have handouts to give to folks when you're talking to them. You want to make sure that people know how to give, make it easy for them to give, whether they can do it online, do it in person. Basically, you want them to be able to give you the money that you want whenever they want to give it to you. So what we would suggest doing is, going out and looking at different campaigns and saying, okay, what does this one look like? So we've got, kind of the logo from Oregon. So we'll flip to the next slide and kind of look at their website. Part of it is on the left is their capital campaign website. It will show you, how to make a pledge, how to donate now via PayPal, some of the naming opportunities, some of that have already been spoken for. Again, that's something you want to keep vibrant and going as you move forward. The next side of that on the right side is really the project progress. So again, you're building awareness, saying, oh, yep, this is really happening. We've got shovels in the ground. We're starting our project. And then you'll maybe notice that, 6 months from now, they'll show you the foundation and some of the walls going up. So you want to kind of keep that presence of the project moving forward, so that again, you can keep building donations in for your project, because in some cases you may have started the project with not all of the money, let's say for your furnishings in hand, but you're confident you'll get there, but you still want to make sure they're continuing to give to the project. Or there may be some different amenities that you kind of phased out of the project that you can really build back in as a funding becomes available. So that's an important reason to keep those things out there. If you want to go to the next one, this is another example of a project page from Eau Claire. It's a much bigger project. You'll notice that they've branded it as the Story Builder campaign. They've got ways to give. It also has a whole series of chapters that kind of give you a chronological order of the progress of the project, what they've done. So chapter 1 really is the needs assessment, the study of the project, and kind of that historical perspective of the project, so that you'll get a better sense. And then some of the other parts of the campaign will go into the stakeholders, giving some video messaging about the importance of the library in the community. So these are all important factors to consider when you're putting your campaign material together. The one thing to be aware of, once a campaign is done, they may take the website down. So if you have examples of project websites that you really enjoy, make sure you capture them somehow so that you have them to go back to. You may not like all of the things that a particular library did, but you like bits and pieces of it. So you're really building your own campaign to make it fit your community. You want to grab the next slide. And again, this is kind of their how to donate. And again, looking at the ways to donate, how it's going to be recognized, and a little bit about the fund. So this project actually is already done, but they still were short a little bit because of that pledge. And usually pledges will come through all the way, but they don't always. So you again maybe want to build in a little extra to cover those pledges. So they're at about 98% of their goal. But they still need to kind of push that last 2%. So that's why their page is still up and running, and they're still trying to build that. Anything else, Brittany?
No, it's the more professional a capital campaign looks, right? Like the website, the handouts that you do, those video moments that you capture, interviewing people who are willing to donate and speak on the project, the fact that you have a capital, campaign cabinet or council or team, it all speaks to building trust about your project. And people give money to things that they trust. and they do not give money to things that seem ambiguous, that seems like it won't work out, that they can't fully visualize, feel proud of. And so all of those things that you're doing to build trust, it goes a long way to the success of your campaign. So
Yeah, and if you don't necessarily have the expertise on your staff, there may be a publicity, graphic designer, social media expert that's willing to donate their time towards your cause, you know, for a little bit of free publicity for them. So, you know, make sure that you tap the resources you have available in your community to make the project work and make it, like you said, Brittany, very professional.
all right. Well, John, it was a pleasure working with you on this project. And we just wanted to thank following entities listed on this slide. They're a large reason why the Wisconsin Library Buildings and Spaces project is happening. So hopefully you've learned some things. On the first slide, John and I both have our email addresses handy. So in case you have any follow-up questions, we'd be happy to entertain them. Anything else, John?
I just want to thank you, Brittany, for all your support with the project. It was very, I think, hopefully very useful for everyone.
Yeah. All right. Well, farewell, everyone.